Hello, lovely viewers. Welcome to another episode of the BPA Community First podcast, where we have legal and social conversations with our community. I am your host, Adelaide Beneprempe, and today we embark on an exciting journey into the world of environmental, social, and governance, ESG. As businesses face mounting pressure from stakeholders, from customers, from employees, and indeed regulatory bodies to recognize and start adhering to responsible practices, understanding ESG has never been more crucial. Whether you're a small or medium-sized enterprise, or indeed a corporation who operates in an industry with significant environmental and social impact, laying a solid foundation for ESG can set you apart from your competition and also enhance your reputation. So in this episode, we're going to dive in to really get to terms with what ESG is all about. We are absolutely thrilled to have here with us today Mr. Kwame Sarpong Barnieh, a partner of KPMG Ghana, specializing in governance, risk, and compliance. With over 20 years' experience in corporate governance, risk management, and operational audits, Kwame comes with a wealth of experience. With diverse clients ranging from financial institutions and healthcare, he is in a unique position to share with us the perspectives of strategic implementation of ESG initiatives. So, if you're eager to learn about ESG and indeed take crucial steps to embark on your sustainability journey, you are in the right place. At this stage, I'll throw the spotlight over to Kwame so that he can tell us why ESG is so crucial and beneficial to our business and also crucial to the long-term sustainability of our businesses. Kwame, you're very welcome, and we're absolutely thrilled to have you here today.
So, I get excited talking about ESG because at KPMG, we say that ESG is not just something to do, it's everything that must be done, right? And in simple terms, I think you said it in your introduction, is that it's looking for organizations to do things in a sustainable manner. I think traditionally, companies have looked at running businesses for profit or some intended purposes that circles around profit. I think what ESG does is it brings in, on the governance side, which is really the bedrock of the whole process, a structure to drive fairness, appropriate oversight, ethics, diversity on boards, true transparency around what are we looking to have our business represent, and our leaders being held account for the right things. The S, I think, is quite important as well, because it's all about how is what we are doing, how is it impacting the society? How are we intentionally looking for ways to be positive in the longer term? Because the way we do business matters. It's not the business we do. And the E, obviously, is on the environmental side, which is all about decarbonization and all these things. How are we contribute to a positive play around the environment? Because we know that we only have one environment, and if we don't keep it safe. So ESG is truly important for organizations to really be held account and move away from profit measurement to impact measurement that drives sustainability as a whole.
I mean, that makes absolute sense to me. But, you know, in our everyday dealings with the community, with businesses, when one is looking at the budgeting, what normally comes to mind is, why should I bother with this? It just sounds like charity to me. I mean, why should I not look at my to-do, prioritize and figure out ESG properly at the very bottom of the pile? So why should we bother?
Fantastic question. I mean, this question must be answered well to really get people to understand that ESG is an imperative. And I answer it by saying that stakeholders, either being regulators, investors, even people choosing firms to work with, will very soon, or are really even today, looking at what does this organization stand for? Are they doing meaningful things? And so, besides the regulatory drive, which is going to compel, most of us, in Ghana, I think by 2027, we must all comply with IFRS S1, S2. We can't run away from that. I think if you're a listed company in Ghana, the Ghana Stock Exchange has rules for you to follow. But besides the regulatory drive, I think there are other stakeholders like investors. They're looking to you to say that, are you a responsible company? And therefore, do I want to put my investments in you? I think the most important thing for any business is the quality of people that they have. And good people are choosing responsible companies. So if we don't take the step early and we don't embrace ESG, it's just evident that we're going to be stuck in the back, and we won't be as relevant anymore.
I think that makes really strikes a chord, and I'm sure our viewers are listening intently, because if you say, good people want to work with responsible companies, now that makes a whole lot of sense. It throws a different light on the conversation, because then you start thinking that there is a benefit to be derived, at least the S in the ESG, and that's a good start. So, okay, so now we know that ESG is not just a sort of to-do, but is a must-have in that sense. What sort of frameworks exist? Because I think that certainly in our side of the world, yes, ESG comes across as, soft requirements. Are there frameworks that one has to adhere to if they want to embark on this ESG journey?
Yes, I think one of the most popular ones is the GRI. And also, I think, as I said earlier, IFRS S1, S2, all these stuff. But generally, when we support our clients, what we say is that you have to start with an assessment phase where you look at some sort of materiality, or what is important, what is so critical in your value chain, in your operating model, that will have an impact on the governance, on the social, and the environment. Once you assess that, you now look for ways to capture it accurately and ways to actually improve it. I think there's a lot of effort or emphasis on ESG reporting, but you cannot report it if you haven't done the right things.
Exactly.
So in the assessment phase, you must look for, how do I improve my impact? On the governance side, do I need to restructure my board? Should my board be more diverse? Do I have the right policies around ethics? Do I have the right policies around my social impact? Who's in my value chain? What people do I deal with? Are they practicing ESG? So you have to think about all these critical elements that fit into your value chain. And when you do that, that's when you take the right steps. So you have to put in processes that will be inculcated within the way you do business. So ESG is not an addition to it. It actually transforms how you do business, right? And I think one critical benefit is that if you look at businesses through ESG, what happens is that there's more rigor. You enhance your rigor as a business, and automatically you become more sustainable, because you're doing the right things, and you are attracting the right capital, attracting the right people, and your stakeholders definitely see you better.
Yeah. So now we have a more savvy demographic of stakeholders. They are not just happy to see you ticking the box like I've reported, but what have you reported? So looking behind the reporting lens and saying, what exactly have you done to improve upon that? So one looks at the organization and says, where can I make impact? Where do I start this journey? But is there any way that there are, by and large, some key areas that are absolutely critical from your experience, that if you look at that, you would say you need to tackle A, B, C first? This is non-negotiable.
I think it starts with the board. The board must own the ESG strategy, and it must be part of your core strategy. That's number one. If the board, which is the oversight body of the business, is not screwed into the ESG agenda, it will not work. I think it's very important to get the governance sorted out, because it's the governance that drives what you do. If you don't have the right structures or the right oversight, or if you don't have the right policies in place, you will not be able to. So I think that the governance element is so important. And I think in my prior statement, I mentioned doing an assessment around what sort of social impact are you having? And therefore, how do you transform that? From a social perspective, the question is, are you giving back to the society? Are you doing things that have a positive impact on society? I think is unique for every company, depending on how you're set up. But I think the lens focuses on how you impact the society, right? And on the environmental side, that's very, very clear. What sort of emissions are you generating? How are you impacting the environment? How are you dealing with entities that impact the environment? Because it's not just about what you do, but what you do with people that you work with.
The end user, how they're benefiting.
Precisely.
Yes. So essentially, the board have to take ownership of it. It can't just be some person who's been brought on board to work ESG magic. The board have to be part and parcel of it, and they need to take ownership and basically adapt practices from that level throughout the organization. So in terms of ESG, there are a number of buzzwords that come up. One is reporting, ESG reporting. The other is materiality. Can you talk us through what materiality is all about?
Very, very good question. I think my audit background always comes out. So materiality is basically looking at what is relevant for me as an entity. It's an assessment where you look at different elements of your value chain and come up with which ones are material, or in plain words, are significant for the G, the S, and the E. That's materiality, basically, because you can't do everything. But what are the critical elements that will give you the most impact?
Right. And that is something that you'd have to do an assessment of and figure out for yourself. So that could be a way of starting your ESG journey or sustainability journey. Okay, so let's moving on from the board. Say you want to invest, you want to take steps on this journey. Are you going to, first of all, look at your staff strength and perhaps identify one or two people as the go-to persons to drive this ESG development and growth for the organization? Because normally, people will talk about ESG, but if it's not, there's no sort of identified person. Sometimes it gets lost in translation. So how do you go about that?
Sure. So I think my recommendation is very simple. Get an experienced hand to help you with the assessment and to help you with where you are and where you should go. That's number one. I already said that the board must own it. However, it doesn't hurt to have somebody who's facilitating the process, who's held accountable to make sure that everybody's on track, because obviously there's change management that must happen. So you can have somebody who reports directly to the board, but is held accountable for what are the KPIs that we must meet? Are we meeting it? Why are we not meeting it? What are the remediation issues that we must deal with? And set clear timelines. I think as human as we are, when we set timelines, when we set targets, we typically achieve them. But if you just leave it open and you just want to do it, just bootstrap it, sometimes it becomes a bit difficult. So get an experienced hand to help you with the assessment, to agree with this ESG strategy, basically, as to what do you need to do, knowing where you are to really make the maximum impact.
So in a sense, it's all about transparency and accountability to make sure that the work is being done. I mean, in your experience, have you come across clients who've experienced challenges trying to identify the relevant people to take ownership, the point of contact of ESG, and what sort of tips have you provided for that to happen?
I think is a new area. Even though in some geographical areas it's more mature than ours. But yes, to find somebody who is ESG savvy holistically sometimes can be difficult, right? But I think it's really about breaking it and inculcating it into your business process. So for instance, talk about principles of governance, right? It's really the same things you're doing, but just making sure that you're doing the right things. Say, do I have the right diversification at my board level? Do I have the right policies? So There's people who probably have governance expertise, so you use them for that, right?
Yeah.
With regards to the social, I mean, how do you get the optimal social impact? They're experts as well. So I think you need to find people who will be interested in those areas or have the experience in those areas to really advise you to know what you should do in those specific areas. Same as environmental. That could be very technical, because as to how much green gases you emit, as to how much decarbonization and even how you measure it, sometimes you can very technical.
Yeah.
So I think finding someone who will deal with all three sometimes is not easy.
Yeah.
But if someone has some experience in one or the other, they could probably easily get involved
in that
yes.
space. I think it makes absolute sense, because when one looks at ESG, it just seems like a completely different beast if you think of it that way. But when you break it down, you realize that, for example, social, you're able to look at your hiring processes, or indeed your board membership, and see whether it's diverse enough, what sort of conditions your employees are working in, and then the governance obviously starts from the board. So I suppose that it then becomes an issue of looking at the people you have, the talent you have, not rushing out to go and get an ESG expert packaged up beautifully, but rather working with what you have. And as you go along, especially those who have passion for it, will develop the skill set a lot more. And I think that I certainly find that the younger generation are more interested in sustainability. And as you said before, are keen to work with good companies in that respect, impactful companies. So if you're going to embark on that journey, I think the message then is, keep an open mind. Don't just shut the book because you think you haven't got the ESG expert lined up. There actually are people around you who could be channeled into various avenues, and they'll do marvelously.
Definitely. I think what I said earlier is basically, with the assessment part, if you can afford it or if you can, get a technical person to help you with the assessment.
Yes.
But with the implementation, because it's really not new things you're doing, it's things that you must do better.
Yeah.
So you probably have people in your organization that will be interested or could learn a bit quickly to align accordingly.
Yes. I mean, that's definitely great. So I know that you have a lot of clientele, and I'm sure you come across a number of companies that want to embark on this journey, but not quite sure, a bit overwhelmed about it. So in terms of measuring their progress in ESG initiatives, how do they go about it? Even before they get to the sort of reporting stage, say a company has turned things around, they're doing things properly, they are adhering to gender equality policies, they're doing it both in their policies as well as in action and what have you. We have, as we said, a very engaged stakeholder community. They want to know what you're doing. So it's all right for you to say, yes, I've done major things, but what are the benchmarks in measuring how far you've gone and what you're supposed to be doing?
So I think it all starts with knowing clearly from your materiality assessment the things you want to report on.
Yeah.
Under the G, under the S, under the E. And data becomes the critical issue, and having the authenticity around the data. So giving comfort. So some of the things that we do, for instance, is materiality assessment for clients. We do things such as ESG strategy, where you define how you're going to make your impact, right? And how you're going to inculcate that into your business. And then once you mature in implementing the strategy, you go to report. Now that report part is so crucial because it ought to have been defined earlier as to what you're reporting on.
Yes.
You must make sure that you have the data to actually validate, to avoid any sort of greenwashing, because it's more dangerous to report incorrect things than to not report at all.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to make sure that you know what you want to report, have the data, the validated data. Typically, some clients will even do some sort of assurance work. So we do a lot of ESG assurance where we validate things that our clients are putting in reports to make sure that we can sign off to say that we have evidence to support that. So it gives you a bit more independence in terms of what you're reporting.
So there's nowhere to hide, basically. I mean, the cracks will begin to show. So we might as well get it right. But that's no excuse not to start. I hugely appreciate that. So in terms of the leaders or those driving ESG in our community, I mean, I know that you're bound by confidentiality, but can you give us examples of the sort of industries that you've come across that are really championing ESG? They are people we can look up to and be inspired by.
I think, I mean, I commend the Ghana Stock Exchange for going to put in a novel standard for, ESG also. And I think it is really giving the listed companies an ability to drive some consistency around what they need to do. It's not entirely mandatory, but I think it provides a good guide, right?
Yeah.
Bank of Ghana has a sustainable banking principles, which I think banks must adhere to. It's really around sustainable finance. And I think that's also a good one. Banks, I think in the banking industry, they will be required to do more than any other industry.
Yeah.
Oil and gas, mining, those industries are also very sensitive because a lot of what they do impacts the environment.
Of course. Yeah.
So there's a lot of prudence around, and even farming. I mean, very soon, today, we see entities that deal in cocoa that are required to clearly identify that they are doing responsible farming.
Yeah.
And therefore, when they are able to identify that, they get significant cuts on rates that they pay for loans and all those. So I think if you look at our environment, finance industry, because of the financing cost, is one. Listed entities, as I said, from the Ghana Stock Exchange. I think also oil and gas, mining industries, those are industries that I think will have to respond a bit faster than others.
So looking across the pond, as we always have to draw inspiration, we always say that responsible business is good business. And that's what we all believe firmly. And therefore, impacting your community is always key. In the short term, it's a little bit difficult to see how once you embark on the ESG journey and you put your money where your mouth is and you invest and you seek an expert like yourself to come and do the assessment and what have you. Once you get, you set the ball rolling, it is difficult to see the short-term benefits immediately to your pocket as businesses that are, guiding their purse stringently in our climate. But do you have examples, perhaps not here, but, abroad, of those who invested earlier on and they can say that long-term they have reaped benefits? Those who look after asset managers and they've seen that, people are investing more, ESG investing businesses or impact investing. Is it something that has translated from their clientele putting in the work to put structures in place?
I think you've said it. I mean, there's clear evidence that shows that entities that practice ESG or sustainability in the long run become better businesses, and there's evidence to this, right? But I think I made a point around operational rigor. When you adopt ESG, some of the things that you're doing is really trying to drive fairness in what you do, especially around your people side.
Yeah.
And motivated people are always great people.
Yeah, the best ambassadors.
Precisely.
Yes.
So if you have the right people culture, typically the organization turns around because people are more committed. They are there for the purpose. They join in the purpose of the business. And that typically ultimately drives better business. So there's evidence to show that companies that are sustainability oriented outperform companies that are just financially oriented.
That makes a whole lot of sense. That is a direct example. I'm sure viewers, you're paying attention to this. It's an absolute crucial point because sometimes we just look at the figures, but the reality is a happy employee, if we can put it that in basic terms, is more committed, is more driven. It impacts positively on productivity. You have better clients or happier clients, and the business grows from there. So I think that is a very crucial point. That is a good takeaway for viewers who are still sitting on the fence as to whether this ESG is something for them or not, because you see it directly, and then you start from there. So that basically brings us to sort of positive outcomes. Where do you see the trend in immediate 5 to 10 years with ESG? ESG, we learned about it, I suppose, back in 2009. That's when I learned about it, when the UN talked about it, and then there was a banking crisis, and then everybody got serious. In recent years, things have been a bit tough going globally. Do you see a dip in investments in ESG, or do you see that people have actually been engaged and are investing more in ESG? So for us here, how will that impact us? Because we're always, thinking about the necessities. And those of us in the services industry, when one is thinking about food, shelter, bills, we always end up at the bottom of the pecking order. So how do you see the trend globally, and how will that impact us?
So I think, interestingly or positively, ESG is growing. It's growing like wildfire. And I'll use two different elements to explain that. I think one is that from a sustainable finance perspective, globally, more than 1/3 of global funds are now green related. This is significant with regards to how much money is available for green related entities and activities, right? So if you're a business that engages in that, you have the probability of getting access to cheaper funding and better stakeholders who you deal with. I think the other thing is more regulatory driven. With IFRS S1, S2 coming, we won't be able to hide anymore. We need to report on critical elements of our sustainable drive, and especially also on our carbon footprint. So we would need, and regulation is not going to stop. It's going to come, and it's because it is needed. It helps us drive responsible businesses. And I think I'm going to add a third one to it, which is more the people. I think today, employees are looking for purpose. Vendors are looking for purpose. So if you don't have a purpose-driven entity that you design and build a culture of purpose, very, very quickly, you would not attract the right people or the right investors or even the right stakeholders. So I think these 3 points really gives the evidence that ESG is on the rise globally. And here in Ghana, I can predict that it's going to go up, especially in some of the regulated industries. As I said, the listed entities. I know it's not mandatory, but very soon I'm sure somebody will become mandatory. Sustainable banking principles, banks will have to adhere to it. And these will make us all fall in line.
Yeah, I think it makes absolutely sense, because certainly in our legal industry, we find that the younger lawyers are very keen on the softer areas. Traditional law is great, but I think they are moving away from that. They want more impact. They want more purpose. So as a company, if you're thinking about your bottom line and the budget, you might lose a few gems in this journey, because then, they want to make impact, as they normally say. So ESG is beautifully aligned to the way they see the world and how they can contribute. So I'm sure the viewers are listening intently to this, because as Kwame has said, we can't hide, and we need to really get on and put our houses in order. So Kwame, before you go, are there any concluding remarks for us? I know we've only touched the tip of the iceberg in this conversation. I don't want to bombard the viewers with too much information, and I hope that we meet again. But any concluding remarks?
Sure, thank you. So I think for viewers, those of you sitting in boardrooms, those of you who are buying from entities, those of you who are just playing a part in your own lives. Let's all know that we all have footprints to support a better world. And ESG is definitely not a host. It's something that is here to stay, because we've seen the evidence that it supports good entities and it supports global transformation of us having good business. So I appeal to all of you to embark on your journeys. However small, is better than nothing.
Great. Well, viewers, there you have it. You heard it from the expert himself, Mr. Kwame Sarpong Barnieh, KPMG's partner, very adept in this area, ESG, governance, risk, compliance. He has hopefully allayed your fears. You are not overwhelmed. You're actually enlightened now to know that you can start small and work your way around it. It's all about accountability, transparency, and doing what you're doing already, but doing it better. But at this stage, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you for making time in your busy schedule to come here and educate us. Once again, this has been the BPA Community First podcast, where we have legal and social conversations with our community. I was your host for today, Adelaide Bene-Prempeh, and I had a wonderful guest in the person of Mr. Kwame Sarpong Barnieh from KPMG Ghana. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.